Hello, and welcome to the Kongversation. Mini. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Cameron Reigle.
And we are still trying to keep up with the news here at DK Vine and the Kongversation. Monday, October 14th. I woke up to the news. I was sleeping in that day because I was editing the podcast until the wee hours, but slept in and I woke up to the news that Craig Duncan, the studio head of Rare for nearly 14 years, has been promoted to oversee Xbox Game Studios, which we formerly knew as Microsoft Studios. And I've been hearing some industry scuttlebutt from some of my sources in the UK gaming scene for a while now that Craig Duncan was going to be promoted, that he was taking on more responsibilities within Xbox. I knew he was quietly overseeing several UK studios under the Xbox umbrella, and I knew they had bigger plans for him. So it was nice to finally get confirmation on that, because the Xbox higher ups, I've learned that they think quite highly of Craig Duncan and the work he's done at Rare and with everyone at Rare for the past decade. So I think this was only inevitable that he was eventually going to be kicked up the ladder. But this now means that Craig Duncan is being replaced by two people at Rare. His duties are going to be split into co-managers, I guess. Joe Neate, who some of you may be quite familiar with. Joe Neate has been Craig Duncan's more or less right hand, because he worked with Craig Duncan at Sumo Digital. I'm sure you have some thoughts there, Cameron, on that front, the irony of it all. But Joe Neate worked with him at Sumo Digital, and then Craig Duncan came to Rare, became studio head, and pulled Joe Neate in. And Joe Neate joined in 2013 and has been most famous as the executive producer on Sea of Thieves. But I'll share my thoughts on all of these people here when I'm done. But got to talk about Jim Horth. Jim Horth has also been promoted to co-captain Rare. Jim Horth, if you're not familiar with the name, joined Rare over 20 years ago. His first credit was R&D on Conquer Live and Reloaded. So that is the landscape at Rare as it now exists. And I just want to share some thoughts and feelings about this, because I know a lot of people out there will not know how to think. And I'm not telling you that we're going to tell you how to think. That's not the case, but we might be able to share some insight. We've met all three, although to varying degrees over time. Jim Horth, I think I've only spoken with once or twice. The biggest memory I have of Jim Horth is Jeff at E3 2019 approaching Jim Horth and discussing his theory of horse magic, which is the theory that when you get horses all together, to complete a task, they will do so more efficiently because they work as a team.
Well, if you have horses that are friends with each other.
Right, horses that are friends with each other.
Jim Horth would not entertain this theory and just assume Jeff was messing with him.
Yeah. And Jeff's like, no, this is a real thing. This is the game principles you've installed into Sea of Thieves. It's based on the principle of horse magic. And so that's my memory of Jim Horth. Took it in great stride. Joe Neate, I've spoken with Joe Neate quite a bit, but I have to be honest, I'm always a little bit intimidated by Joe Neate, because Joe Neate has the air of your cool uncle who comes riding in on a motorcycle. So I always just felt like, not intimidated is the wrong word, but I always felt like Ralph Malph talking to the Fonz on Happy Days. I just couldn't really do it. But Joe Neate, he was very, very warm and very welcoming when I went to Rare in 2016. And in fact, he was my biggest memory of Joe Neate is he was so over the moon that the Sea of Thieves trailers at E3 2016 were just about the only game that didn't leak ahead of time. Like, nothing about it leaked ahead of time, which was a huge feather in their cap because they invited all of these fans to Rare to play Sea of Thieves early, and then we didn't realize it, but we were being filmed for the trailer for E3, and it didn't leak. None of that leaked out, and so they took a huge gamble, and it paid off. So he was very, I think, relieved that we weren't blabbermouths. So that's my impression of Joe Neate.
Yeah, I think Joe Neate is the one of the three I've had the least one-on-one time with, and part of that is, as you say, I don't think Joe Neate is an intimidating person, but I am easily intimidated.
Well, that's it, yeah.
Of the three, his was the name I have been familiar with the longest because at Sumo Digital, he was a producer on Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, and in the role of producer was usually like fielding pre-release interviews with various outlets.
Uh-huh.
So I just happened to know the name because of obsessively following that game, which was the sequel to Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing with Banjo-Kazooie.
Sans Banjo-Kazooie, yeah.
Yeah. That happened under Craig Duncan's tenure. So it's just kind of funny that all these roads lead back to these two Sega racing games.
Yeah, the basic future direction of Rare was laid out with the Sonic and Sega Racing series, duology, if you will. And Craig Duncan. Now, Craig Duncan, longtime Kongversation listeners will be familiar with Craig Duncan because he's been on the show. He was kind enough to sit in on the Kongversation a good 7 years ago, in fact. Cameron and I interviewed him. And look, I can only share personal thoughts about Craig Duncan because I've obviously never worked with him. I don't know him as a coworker or as a boss, but from all of my interactions with him, and I think, Cameron, you've experienced the same. I think anybody in our community who's talked one-on-one with him will walk away with this impression. He is a genuinely warm man. And what always blew me away about him since E3 2015, when I first met him, he always makes time to just talk with the fans. At these big industry trade shows, he will drop whatever he's doing. If he will see you, if he knows who you are, or if you strike up a conversation with him, he remembers you, and he'll talk to you for a shockingly long amount of time, to the point where I'm feeling guilty that I'm monopolizing the head of Rare's time at E3 when he's got all of these other journalists with a lot more pedigree than me, with a lot, further outreach than me. And Craig Duncan is talking to DK Vine. Why are you doing it, Craig Duncan? He didn't matter when it was. Like, the only time he would be like, oh, I have to go, was when he had a meeting with Disney to pitch the Pirates of the Caribbean crossover. But yeah, I did not expect him to be that, outgoing with the fans, and to be that personable and to that easy to talk to. So that impressed me from the start.
I've shared this story before on the Kongversation, but I think the defining moment of when I understood the kind of person Craig Duncan is, at least again, outside of a business context. I'm sorry I won't be able to give any insight on what I think this means for the corporate direction of Xbox Studios, really, or Rare for that matter, to much of a degree. It was the first year I was out at E3 in 2017, and Rare had a very cramped space set aside for Sea of Thieves on the show floor.
Yeah.
You and I were sort of standing in a corner, loitering, kind of, I think we were just kind of waiting for access to Rare's booth because it was frequently just completely cut off by security because it was overfilled. We were just casually talking, and through like a few lines of like Q, like pole tether, we see Craig Duncan talking to some people, and I think we both kind of look at each other like, "Oh shit, that's Craig Duncan." I'd love to talk with him, but he looks like he's super busy, and like his time's more valuable than ours. I don't want to bother him. And then, like a second after I think that, he makes eye contact with both of us, just kind of glancing over, immediately stops what he's doing, and bolts over to both of us to ask how we're doing.
Yeah.
He genuinely seems to have like this love and appreciation for people who love the things that his studios do.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people will be skeptical of any personal anecdotes like that because, of course he's trying to butter up the fans. He wants us to talk well of Sea of Thieves or whatever. But if that's the case, he's always on. He never once
Right.
has ever turned it off. And so, like, personally speaking, I have a pretty high opinion of Craig Duncan and his time at Rare. And looking at what he's been able to do, and I realize this is going to be more of a divisive topic for some of our audience, but I want to break it down really quick and look at his tenure at Rare, because right out of the gate, and this is not something that not a lot of people probably realize. I made a point to mention this in the news article I wrote on DK Vine the day this was announced. Craig Duncan is the primary reason they saved Manor Park, the sprawling campus that Rare moved into towards the end of the Nintendo years. I think it was the year 2000 they moved to Manor Park. And, Manor Park is this gorgeous state-of-the-art video game campus, or it was state-of-the-art. It still is, but I mean, state-of-the-art for when it was built, out in the English countryside in Twycross. And there's nature trails, there's just big sprawling fields, there's just a lot of quiet solitude for creativity.
It seems like a very like mentally healthy space to work on things in.
Yes, it really is. Like, whenever you think of a Rare game and the thematic focuses that usually come with Rare games, an emphasis on nature over industry, a celebration of wildlife, that is readily abundant where they actually have been making the games for the last quarter century. So it was in the Connect Sports era, sort of the end of the last era of Rare and bleeding into the Craig Duncan years when they were making the Connect Sports trilogy. And there were plans to move Rare's base of operations to Birmingham, the nearest big city in the UK, in the English Midlands. And they were going to completely shutter Manor Park. The thought was, we need to be kind of where the jobs are. We need to be where people are if we're going to attract new blood to Rare. And like sequestering ourselves in the countryside does us no favors. This is wasted space. And Craig Duncan came in, and one of the first decisions he made was, no, you can't do that. This is, I think, instrumental to how Rare operates, and Rare would lose a lot of their identity and soul if we just moved, like every other tech startup, into a crowded urban space. And so, yeah, it's because of Craig Duncan that we still have Manor Park, which I am relieved as a Rare fan, and actually having been privileged enough to go there in 2016, it is truly a remarkable space. It did feel like touring Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. So, yeah, I mean, that's just one thing, like right out of the gate that he did. But I think if we're honest, he played a large hand in turning Rare around at a time that things seemed the bleakest for the studio. And we can obviously argue about decisions that were made and how they got there.
I would say, like, there's definitely some scrutiny to be placed on, like, the direction of the studio.
Mm-hmm.
Once things started moving under Craig's leadership, but I feel like until he did, the studio was absolutely rudderless, is the impression I get.
Yes. And yeah, I don't like saying that as a Rare fan. I don't like saying they were completely adrift, because they were still able to churn out good stuff. But the problem is a lot of that stuff wasn't really catching fire. And it really was, I think, towards the end of the Stampers' tenure, towards them stepping down, and they needed a solid direction and a way to still be Rare, but actually move into the future in a way that operating within a giant corporate ecosystem like Microsoft and Xbox, something had to change, for better or for worse. And that, obviously it's a team effort, it's a collaboration, but that brought us to Sea of Thieves, and that has turned out to be Rare's biggest success of all time. It's really breathed new life into Rare as a studio, pumped a lot more capital into it, and has become a pillar of Xbox's portfolio, and now on PlayStation 5 as well. So I think that I agree, or at least I understand how a lot of longtime Rare fans feel, because I am one of you, that, it really just completely fucking sucks that we haven't had a new Banjo-Kazooie game since 2008. And even that was quite divisive. And all these other legacy Rare properties, outside of Rare Replay and Battletoads 2020, just haven't been given the time of day, the respect, the adulation they deserve. But having said that, I would also consider that, Craig Duncan's goal, and he's spoken with me about this, he's spoken on the Kongversation about this, was always to ensure that Rare's fate was secure. And Rare's fate wasn't secure when he took over. It was a very tumultuous decade following the buyout, with some highs and a lot of lows, at least sales-wise. And even the highs were middling at best. Look, I love Viva Pinata. I've really grown to love Viva Pinata, especially in the last couple of months when I've actually devoted some time to playing it. I understand how brilliant that is. But even Viva Pinata, which was, heralded as their biggest success post-Nintendo, wasn't really the success that they were looking for. The studio needed to prove that it wasn't just a has-been unable to evolve with the marketplace. And I think that meant finding the balance between its classic identity and the present day. And that meant, at the time, working on something that wasn't Banjo-Kazooie. And I don't think that should be confused for personal animosity towards Banjo-Kazooie, because that is not the same thing.
Yeah, I think with the distance of time, it's easy to forget that, and on our interview with Craig Duncan, unfortunately, I think people kind of took it the wrong way at the suggestion of, like, the worst thing for Rare would just to be a sequel factory to all their beloved games. Before Sea of Thieves, before Rare Replay, before Connect Sports even, I feel like it's really easy to forget the prevailing attitude about Rare used to be that they're a studio that only A, makes things I don't care about, or B, makes sequels to things that I used to care about that aren't as good.
Mm-hmm.
That was the prevailing attitude online in any space about Rare, if it wasn't just general animosity about the buyout and coping with the buyout by just kind of brushing off everything they ever did as not very good.
Yeah.
So I think a touchstone like success like Sea of Thieves was important to just kind of like unshackle Rare from all of their baggage that came with being the studio known for the games that they were known for, while Rare Replay reasserted that that hadn't been forgotten, that was still part of their identity.
Right. Yeah. I think that, unfortunately, a lot of things worked or conspired against Rare in the turn of the millennium. And I think the buyout provided a jumping off point for a lot of their hardcore fans who were mostly Nintendo loyalists. And then the narrative started to build. And because that audience wasn't with them on the Xbox, I mean, obviously, a lot of us at DK Vine made the jump. A lot of people listening to this made the jump, but
it was a jumping off point without a jumping on point, because at that point, a lot of Rare's projects had started work for their audience on Nintendo, and there was very little overlap in that Venn diagram with the then just sort of getting started Xbox audience.
Yeah, and so they struggled. I mean, it broke my heart to see them struggle. I hold up Grab by the Ghoulies, their first game on Xbox, as a classic, and it's still widely mocked and derided to this day. Not as much. Rare Replay helped rehabilitate its image a little bit, but
honestly, I think back of how many years Rare spent in a pretty rocky position, and looking at the landscape of game development now, I count my lucky stars at oh god, none of those was the straw that broke the camel's back. That Rare is still around and weathered the storm.
You look at how ugly things have gotten the last couple of years. I mean, just under Xbox. I mean, it fucking sucks. But Rare has been in a pretty enviable position. And that is because of the success of Sea of Thieves, because of the team they have there now, and because of the stewardship of Craig Duncan, honestly. And keep in mind that Craig Duncan will still have bosses above him at Microsoft. He's not the large in charge king of all things Xbox now. He's still got to report to Matt Booty, who is president of game content and studios. And then, of course, you've still got Phil Spencer lording over all as CEO of Microsoft Gaming. So it's not like Craig Duncan can now just decree whatever he wants to get done. But I look at what I know of Craig Duncan and what he's talked about with us over the years. And I look at his tenure, and beyond just Sea of Thieves, beyond just Rare Replay, beyond just Everwild being in development hell for several years now, under his tenure, we did get other glimpses of classic Rare properties. Killer Instinct 2013 is kind of a maybe, because I feel like that's more of Ken Lobb's doing. But, Craig Duncan didn't put the kibosh on it at the very least. Conker's big reunion happened under his tenure. Young Conker, I have to mention it. I think he and everyone at Rare realized instantly that was a public relations fiasco, and that they were going to have to be more judicious about letting their properties be used. Ironically, I think the backlash to Young Conker might have put the brakes on anybody else doing a Banjo-Kazooie game for a while, because they had to be dead sure it was the right direction for it. But even then, we got Banjo-Kazooie and Smash, and we've seen a rekindling of a working relationship between Rare and Nintendo, the healthiest and strongest it's been since 2002. Honestly, before 2002, probably the healthiest it's been since early 2001. And as a Rare fan since 1994, as a fan of the shared universe they cultivated during that time, that was then split in two across two very different platforms and ecosystems. All I ever wanted after the buyout was for them to find a way to work together again, to preserve that legacy. And we are finally getting it. And I never thought we would get there. Early 2010, I'd basically given up all hope that it would ever come to fruition. And we got there. And I think, I mean, it's not even getting into how much I love Sea of Thieves. You know, like, we are champions of Sea of Thieves, not in, like, playing. We're often quite terrible at it, but we champion Sea of Thieves quite a bit because I think it has appealed to our sensibilities on the DK Vine staff.
Very well, probably has overtaken Team Fortress 2 at this point for the single game I've sunk the most hours into.
I honestly wonder if it's the game I've played the most in my entire lifetime now. When I just look at how often I go back to it, how I play it religiously almost every week, how many hours I've actually devoted.
I've had single Sea of Thieves sessions longer than it takes me to fully complete other DKU games.
Yeah, right. So, and I think Sea of Thieves was absolutely the right direction, especially post-Connect Sports. It's easy to forget how it felt when all Rare was doing was Connect Sports. And again, that's no shade meant towards the actual integral quality of Connect Sports. As Craig Duncan did say, it's the best bowling ever on any platform. But as far as Rare's identity, and speaking again to their soul, I feel like Connect Sports really just wasn't it. It just didn't feel like a Rare game as far as personality, as far as presentation. The quality was there, but it really just did feel like everything that made Rare was being stripped away after the failure of Nuts and Bolts. And Sea of Thieves, when I played it very first time, the impression I got was, oh my god, this feels like a Rare game. Like this is it. Like I'm feeling that magic. This is a different type of Rare game than I've ever played, but this is the exact sensation that drew me to Rare back when I first played Donkey Kong Country. Just that intangible magic. So, I mean, it cracked the formula, right? Like, they found a way to make a Rare game work on the Xbox platform in 2018. I think that it's no wonder that they had been eyeing him for a promotion. And I know a lot of people will be, like, wondering what this means for the future of Rare, what this means for the future of Rare's classic properties, what this means for everything under the umbrella of the DKU. And we don't know. We honestly can't say.
We really don't. I would just say in the immediate future, it's probably not going to mean a whole lot because, as you've said, this has been a gradual process in the background all along.
Yeah.
This isn't a sudden gear shift overnight.
Right. I think all I would say is I'm cautiously optimistic, and here's why. Craig Duncan does know how passionate Rare fans are. E3 2019, you were there, Cameron. You were there, and you were there.
Oh, I was absolutely there.
Mitchell was there. So you can watch our, reaction video to Banjo-Kazooie getting announced in Smash. Okay, so we hadn't seen...
Maybe turn the volume down a little bit.
We hadn't seen Craig Duncan that E3. It was that Tuesday, the Tuesday of the Nintendo conference, that I think we first ran into him. And we just ran... It was just one of those E3 things is just you run into industry figures when you're out and about. Like, it's not even necessarily in the LACC or where they set up shop for Xbox and the Microsoft Theater. You might just see them in downtown Los Angeles because it's a very, like, cloistered area where all the convention and trade show goers, hang out. And so we just ran into Craig Duncan out and about in the open. And the very first thing he did when he saw us was, "What'd you think about today?" Like, referencing the Banjo and Kazooie announcement. Like, he was like, that was the thing he wanted to talk about first and foremost was Banjo and Kazooie are in Smash. How do you like them apples? And so, like, he gets it. I've talked with him off the record probably in my lifetime for, I want to say 2 hours, but it's probably even longer given, how he just keeps going, even when you're feeling bad about it. He just keeps you locked in. And I've talked with him. He gets it. He knows what this means to us, to all of you. And I do think with him in charge of Xbox Game Studios, the very least, we might have more forward momentum. He might be moving things a little bit faster as far as finding homes for these franchises, at least under the review and oversight of the people at Rare. I think he's still going to be very protective of Rare, obviously. It's not just going to be, we're plundering Rare of their IP. It's going to be lessons learned from Young Conquer, finding the right fit. But I do think there is a better chance of that happening now than there was just a couple of years ago, even. And I know people are skeptical, especially in light of, oh my God, the recent controversy. I feel like we have to just briefly address this elephant in the room.
Yeah, it feels like we should talk about it, even though it's kind of just been revealed to be nothing at this point.
It's nothing, but people are going to want to keep making it something. And I feel like we can't just do a mini episode talking about Craig Duncan's promotion and what that can mean for Banjo and everyone else, you know, spinning out of Diddy Kong Racing if we don't bring this up. So this recent controversy, alleged controversy, overblown controversy about comments allegedly said by Xbox's Aaron Greenberg, VP of Games Marketing. Cameron, do you want to just briefly lay this out, because I don't even feel like that plugged into this, exactly what happened?
A YouTuber reported that there was a promotional event for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, and I think it was My Nintendo.
A few outlets picked it up. Yeah.
Essentially, a PR person solicited crowd reactions of what Microsoft franchises are you excited about? Somebody, of course, shouted Banjo-Kazooie. And according to this YouTuber, Aaron Greenberg was overheard saying, nobody cares about Banjo-Kazooie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, what seems to have been lost in translation was Greenberg responded on Twitter and after the whole firestorm this caused, because of the dubious sourcing on this, we kind of wondered, and again, said YouTube video was in Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
Was this something that was actually said? Is this just stirring the pot for no reason? Or maybe he did said it, but the sarcasm was lost in translation, because it does seem like just a weird marketing suicide move to ask your audience what they want, hear the answer, and tell them, no, that's wrong, actually.
Here's the thing, and the reason I was skeptical is this is exactly something we have lived at DK Vine. The infamous mistranslated interview with the creators of Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, where they allegedly said that the characters of Donkey Kong Country aren't fresh enough for today's gamers, which, of course, was this huge source of unending rage for DK Vine and our community in the mid-aughts. And come to find out years later that this article, which I can say which major outlet ran with this, IGN ran this mistranslated article. It was IGN who ran this mistranslated Jungle Beat interview. Come to find out, they never said that. It was a wildly stretched translation.
I'd say maliciously mistranslated, just based on how incredibly far off it was.
Yeah, they basically said that because Jungle Beat was such a wild swing compared to past Donkey Kong games. They didn't feel like it was right to put past Donkey Kong characters in it because it would be doing them a disservice. So this whole, like, well of angst that we dipped our buckets in for years was an oasis of lies. And we were young, we were fiery, we were passionate, but it was a good teaching moment for me that when something like this happens, especially in today's online ecosystem, which is built on rage and clickbait, maybe source some things first before you fly off the handle. So I didn't bring it up here at DK Vine. I didn't run any articles on it. I didn't engage with social media about it. I was just like, let's see how this plays out, because as you said, Cameron, it seems like something that the VP of Games Marketing and Xbox maybe wouldn't say if they valued their job. And so what was the case then? What was Aaron Greenberg's explanation for what happened?
I absolutely know how much Banjo-Kazooie means to our fans and gamers everywhere. It holds a special place in my heart growing up playing these classic games.
Okay. So...
And that was in response to someone else on Twitter saying that they assumed that this was sarcasm lost in translation. He was verifying that was very much the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, how many times have we on this show said all the good people left in 2001 or some variation thereof? It's a knowing joke.
Obviously, I understand how tensions are frayed with Banjo-Kazooie fans. I feel it too. I mean, I'm not immune to it. I sometimes just do get blue because I think, it's been 5 years since Banjo and Kazooie were announced for Smash, and there's been no follow-up. This is ridiculous. And I just, I look at all these other revivals and remakes and Croc, and I'm just like, oh, okay, Croc and Gex and everybody can come back, but what's wrong with Banjo and Kazooie? So, I do get it, but it's a shame that this happened in what should have been a very positive week for Banjo-Kazooie fandom, getting the news that Banjo-Tooie is coming to Nintendo Switch Online within 45 minutes of when we're going to finish this recording. And it's... I don't know. I kind of just wanted to pull out my hair a little bit about it all. But obviously, I think that even if it was, and it's not, but even if it was to be taken at face value, it's just one person in the cog at Xbox. And I think that, I am cautiously optimistic, as I said, that Craig Duncan, his time as head of Xbox Game Studios, will yield some fruit for fans of Rare beyond just Sea of Thieves or, knock on wood, Everwild. I think that there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about the future, and for that we just have to look at what we've actually gotten within the last decade or so from Rare, from Xbox, concerning these classic properties. And I think that maybe this is enough to turn the page and actually see some movement there.
I don't know quite enough about how Joe and Jim operate in their day-to-day to know what that's going to mean for Rare, but it might be a good thing to have a pair of people on good terms with each other helming Rare to take advantage of Horth magic.
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.